Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 20 of Conscious Conversations in Parenting with Natalie and I. We're going to be talking about clear, consistent consequences. And I know this is a challenge for so many parents, right? I probably have this conversation with like every parent I know. So I'm excited to jump into that. If this is our first time meeting, hi, I'm Angie. I'm the creator of Journey to Soul. And this is Natalie. I'll let her introduce herself after quickly. But I'm a mom. I have a 10-year-old. I have an almost 5-year-old. And, one thing I know is parenting without community is really tough. And so I love I already naturally just bring women together so that we can grow and learn and expand and share and make an impact in the world. And conscious conversations is definitely a big part of doing that. I think every time we have these conscious conversations, we plant seeds for each other, we awaken, we have these aha moments, we're able to move forward, we don't feel so alone, which is really helpful. So that we can step out of shame and we can step out of guilt and we can step out of all these heavy energies that we always seem to deal with as moms. And so that's my introduction today. I'll let Natalie introduce herself to you.
Thank you, Angie. Right. So I have a family, husband, two kids, and this has probably been um one of the today's topics, right? Like clear and consistent consequences. I'm not sure if you should introduce the topic, but this is something that I've struggled with um in parenting kind of from day one. And that's why I love having these conversations because it brings new wisdom to light. Um, and then we get to share our experiences, the funny stuff and the not so funny stuff. And it's just such a great way for everyone to connect together in sometimes our like really messy and confused humanness,
Yeah,
right? Yeah. So
absolutely.
yeah, so thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you Angie again for hosting these conversations. I know
Yeah.
it helps out a lot of people.
Hey, thanks for being willing to talk about these things out in the open. We're not taught
Yeah.
that. We're not taught to talk about this stuff. In fact, we're taught to suppress it. We'll save that for next topic, though, next episode. Yeah, I agree with you. Clear, consistent consequences. I have been always feeling challenged by this. And it's been a source of self-blame, shame, guilt. Like I can't be clear and consistent. But we always talk about this often on this channel, about being conscious. Like we're always making this effort to be conscious, right? And so in that effort, I've noticed recently, which is why I really wanted to have a conversation about this. My daughter was really upset, and it's because I took away her electronics. And she was really upset one night when I kind of told her, I reminded her that, she lost her electronics. And she was so upset. And I immediately went into my Tonglen practice where I breathe in her pain and wish for all beings to be free of it and breathe out, you know, um, fairness, wholeness, peace, calm, right? For her. And as I was doing that, what happens when I do that practice is it really helps me come back to compassion and come back to understanding. And so I had a moment where I realized like she was just crying and I was giving her the space to cry and be upset about it. And I was laying under her on the bunk bed. And then I realized, like, of course she's upset. I'm like, I never actually gave her a clear consequence of what would happen when like, I caught her with her electronics at night. And then she lied about it. And so she doesn't actually know what the consequence is. She knew she lost her electronics, but that's it. And, in her head, she hadn't, so she I didn't give her clear consequences, but she knew that she lost her electronics, so she just wasn't on electronics for a week and a half, you know? And then this one night she picked up her electronics and I was kind of like, you know, you lost your electronics, right? And then she was really upset.
Mm. So it's like that length of time that was not clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also it wasn't clear to her that what she was receiving a consequence for was actually for the lie, not for hiding the electronics.
Uh,
Right. So it launched us into that conversation. And it also launched me into an apology to her. And I apologized to her. I said, you know, honey, I understand why you're upset. And I was like, you know, I wasn't clear. I just didn't want to have the conversation, I think, you know. And if I get self-honest, I didn't want to have the conversation because I don't like taking things away from you. I don't like making consequences. Like, let's get real about that. I don't even like giving the consequences. And I think that's what stops me from being consistent.
yeah. And another thing about consistency is it depends on the child's age, right? Because you can start applying something, have a consequence, have set rules or boundaries or whatever, when they're 5. But then is it the same when they're 7, 8, 9, 10? Like, and even like within that same year, because their personalities shift so quickly,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. And I think something that I sometimes grapple with is, again, that whole concept of consequences, right? Because to me, sometimes it feels like uh, you're just trying to boss them around, or like, is it a fair consequence? But even then, yeah, I don't know. I'm so glad you brought up this conversation because I'm like, I wonder what kind of wisdom's going to come pouring out of us because right now, I don't know. Right?
Yeah. I question that
Yeah.
too, though. I love that. Is it fair? Like, I don't know. And that's why sometimes I don't address it right away because I'm reactive first. And you
Mm,
don't want to give the consequence in reaction,
no.
right?
That's that's interesting. I always usually go like into really deep presence, whereas some people may see that as ignoring the situation. And I'm like,
Right.
I'm not ignoring it. I'm going within because I'm trying to figure out what was the internal thing in me that produced this
That did
external
this.
thing. And then I go down the rabbit hole and then I'm like, oh, forget the consequence. Like, I just had a brilliant breakthrough, right? And then I go journal and I'm like,
Oh my God, I love it.
"Whoa." But that's what happens. So it is interesting to keep a balance of we are consistently awakening, we are consistently respecting our children as human beings,
Yes.
right? And I find that this is really where like two generations diverge, right? Like us and our parents, where it was when I was growing up, it was like if you don't listen, then this is the consequence. It doesn't matter if it makes sense or not. It doesn't matter, if it leaves bruises or not. Like that's what it is. Question it. That's just how it is. And not that I didn't grow up. I grew up in a really loving home, but that was just kind of the reality of that era, right? And of that
Yes.
society's mindset at that time. But now everything is shifting so quickly, and now
Yes.
we're not only seeing our children as little slaves or gophers or whatever. We're seeing them as souls as ancient as time,
Yes.
inhibiting little tiny human bodies. So I'm like, so that's really where I kind of like, where my mind kind of like grabs me and it's like, oh, let's go down this rabbit hole. You don't have to parent that effectively. Like, let's go down this rabbit hole. Right. So that's kind of where my struggle, to be honest, is.
Mm, that's interesting. That's interesting. And hmm, do you have moments of clarity around that? Like, do you have moments where you get what's going on there? It's like I'm picturing, oh, you know what's coming to me? It's like you're trying, it's like this little ant and you're trying to get your finger on it, but it's moving so fast. And it's like it just escapes. It's like you understand what's actually happening here, but you can't quite put your finger on it.
I love that's a great analogy. Yeah.
And it's like you're trying and then it just escapes. You're like, ah, ah. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't know, I mean, I don't know specifically in your situation, right? But I wonder,
Mhm.
do you have moments of clarity where you realize, oh, I don't want to say it that way. This is the better way, or you know what I mean? Like, because I have moments
Mm.
like that too, where I'm like, this is the way. This is the way that feels more aligned. And I have, but I can't quite put my finger on what that is. So I can't repeat it. Like I can't, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I wonder if that's because like you and I are very and we talk about being in the present all the time
Yeah.
because when you live in the present moment, you're not like, I don't know, let's say they left a mess in the living room or something and then they don't want to clean up. Are you trying to figure out, okay, what did I do last time? But to me, last time is irrelevant because we're all
Yes.
in a different moment. We're all in a different frequency. So often what I do is again, I what I often do to be honest is I just scrub it out and I stay in my own lane. But sometimes I'm like, is that actually like healthy for my kids that I'm just like and I know it is on a deeper level, I know it is,
Yeah.
but I'm just like really interested to see how these kids turn out because it's like we're
It's an
waking up like every
experiment.
moment and it's
We are.
because I find and maybe this is just the way consequences have been defined in our society and how
Ah,
we just want to push back because it's like, well, that's not how I want to be in this present moment, right? I don't want to punish. Maybe that's what it is, right? Consequences are often linked to the word punishment
yes.
instead of the word um, like learning, right? Or
That's why we don't want to
experiencing.
give
Because even the word
consequence.
discipline means actually like to learn, right?
Yes.
So maybe that's what it is. Oh, dude. Huh.
Yeah. And why we
Whoa.
don't want to do it. That's why our soul doesn't want to do it because it's
Hmm.
punishment. It's linked to punishment. And it is. So you here's something I really struggle with. I really struggle with I don't want to give a consequence in reaction. My children move through emotion real fast, real fast. They are over it and it's done. So if I wait for me to not be reactive and try to revisit it with my 10-year-old, especially, it's
Yeah.
already done for her. So then we get into another argument because she's annoyed that I'm even talking about it because it's gone.
Yeah.
And then I'm mad that it's gone because I don't know why. Why am I mad? Why am I mad that it's gone? I don't actually know why. And so that's one of my, I feel like I'm always playing on this line of trying not to come out of reaction and then waiting. And then I spend a lot of time and energy on wondering when should I bring it up? And then anytime I do try to bring it up, it doesn't feel good. And I know that means something. That's what I mean about not being able to put my finger on it because I know it means something that doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel aligned. And I'm not sure yet what that means. I don't not sure what feels aligned then. Because the truth is there's moments with if I'm in the present moment, like Natalie and I always talk about, and Julie always talks about, when I'm in the present moment, I'm actually able to do what my children do, which is have the emotion, be with it, present with it, allow it to pass, and then I'm over it. And so the truth is, the thing that I think is wrong and needs a consequence, once I sit with it and I'm present with it, it's no longer wrong to me, if that makes any sense. And that's a struggle because Is that why I want to give a consequence in the first place? Because I think something's wrong. And just because I think something wrong, it doesn't mean it's wrong. And so that's one of the things I have a hard time with because, again, the longer I sit in presence, the less wrong it is. But then I still feel like I need to make a consequence because I'm programmed to do that. I'm programmed to think
Yeah.
that this is wrong and there should be a consequence and you shouldn't let them get away with it. That's what we're taught.
Yes. That sentence floats around here too sometimes. Yeah. And I find, yeah, and I mean, it's kind of the same thing with me where I don't want to, again, make a decision or say a consequence or whatever from a place of reaction. But then I get present, I go, sometimes I just go somewhere else, right? Because sometimes if the energy is too intense, right? If everybody's ego is like, grr, arg, and I'm like, I'm
And
going for
I'm
a
out.
little walk on the other side of the house. Because I don't want my ego to get sucked into the mix, right? Which is a healthy, that's a healthy response,
Yeah.
guys, of recognizing, okay, I'm not going to make a wise decision here, so let's just go for a walk. It's totally fine to take a break,
Yeah.
which is something else that society programs us the opposite, but it's totally fine to not make a decision on the
In that
spur of the
moment.
moment, right? And then when I come back to it later, sometimes I'm like, but I just changed the frequency. So did that actually happen?
Yeah.
Right?
And is there a need to go
Because they're
back to it?
behaving perfectly fine. They're helping out, they're cleaning up or whatever, or they're being kind to each other. And then I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm not bringing this shit up. Oh,
That's
because
exactly
then
it.
it'll
Because I
trap
feel that
their
too.
frequency.
Yeah.
So see, this is where it gets like confusing because it's funny because the title of this is like clear and consistent consequences, but I find I'm just the more we dive in, I'm like,
For making
but
it more vague.
yeah, because well, maybe
Because it
it's
is.
because
Maybe it's
we're
not
diving
clear.
into something, we are connecting to something that has no definition,
Yes.
that's
It's
fathomless, and we're
new.
recognizing that fathomless within everyone.
Yes.
Within the criminals, within our kids that are sometimes little punks, within ourselves when we're, being harsh on ourselves, but we recognize that, like, that source within everybody, right? So maybe this is why it's
Yes.
hard to get
And
clear
so
on
it's not
this.
wrong. That's what I keep coming back to. It's not wrong what somebody's doing because they're not their behavior.
Yeah. And
They're
I
not.
find, and again, it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out in a couple of generations, but I find that this is probably going to be a healthier way to be in life. But it doesn't have to be, you don't have to react quickly. It doesn't have to, consequences don't have to be harsh. Consequences don't have to equal punishment, right?
Yes.
Maybe the consequences, like, just be silent, even if it's super uncomfortable.
Yeah, maybe that
Just
is
be
the
silent and let the
consequence.
other person rage, right? I don't
Give the
know.
other, yeah, that's actually a really valuable point, Natalie. Oh my goodness. So, yes, because you're not taking on the burden of, you're not taking on the burden of that emotion that the other person's feeling. And the consequence could literally be that you have to deal with the feelings. You, my child, have to deal with my silence.
Yeah.
You, my darling, have to feel. Oh, interesting. Man, because this example, right? I didn't even get mad at her when I knew, my gut knew she was lying to me. And so I didn't want to believe that, but I was literally like, get out of the bed. And I could tell she was a little like bewildered. And then I found it and she immediately knew. She just knew. I didn't need to do anything. Do you know what I mean? She knew. And I
Yeah.
didn't say anything. I just took the electronics and I said, these are gone. And she said, I'm so sorry, Mom. And that was it. And I walked away. So maybe that was already the consequence.
Yeah. That experience of being uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
And
And
that kind of
sitting
maybe
there.
prolonged the lesson of you having that later conversation with her and being
Yeah.
honest with yourself that, like, oh yeah, it wasn't clear because I didn't want to be clear because it's super uncomfortable being a mom sometimes,
Yes,
right?
it is.
Yeah.
It
Maybe we have to
is.
just again change the whole concept
Mm.
of that word consequence.
Yeah, we were just having a conversation today in membership, and somebody said that, like, one of the women were talking about how she's trying to like undo all these definitions of words that we have. She's trying to be really conscious of words and what they mean, the meaning that they hold that's programmed. And like the word consequence is totally linked to punishment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a punishment though to sit with your emotions. Isn't that like the next our next
Yeah.
episode is going to be about emotion. And so isn't it interesting that we're talking about that next? But emotion isn't a punishment. Emotion is an experience. It's an expression of humanity.
Yeah. And silence is not a punishment either. Although
Yes,
most people are very uncomfortable with silence.
very.
But I just spent a week by myself, in a bit more than a week by myself that I didn't actually have to talk to anyone, right? Especially
Mhm.
once I was done work for that week. And I caught myself talking to myself. And then I'm like, why am I like even talking to the cat? I'm like, cats don't need verbal communication. Like they're beyond that, right?
Right.
And
Uh,
but it was really interesting that feeling of uncomfortableness of silence, of not even talking to myself out loud, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
And we're so heavily programmed that silence is respectful, right? Like when you're in church or in a meeting or whatever. But then otherwise it's gotta be like raw, loud, and everything has to be distracting and like neon lights and
Yes.
volume up. But it's because society's kind of set up to distract us from
They give
going
us
within,
every
from the
distraction
silence.
possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not our
Because
fault.
silence is, yeah. Because in the silence, once you start getting comfortable with silence, you just discover yourself in that silence, man. Like your real self. Yeah. So yeah, silence isn't a consequence either, right? But that's often
Yeah.
something that happens when, you know, um, again, you're trying not to, or you choose not to react to whatever situation is going on with your kids, and you just choose to be silent and present instead. And that can be really uncomfortable for you. And I'm sure as hell that it's uncomfortable for the other people because they're like, respond to me. Like, I need a response,
Like,
right? Like,
especially when they're in pain, we talk about the pain body a lot, right? And
mm,
when a person's in pain, their pain body is trying to hook yours, like.
ah,
And if you're
yeah,
not giving it that, that's uncomfortable.
yeah,
That's really uncomfortable. And so I'm really like landing on this. Maybe that's the consequence. Like, there's nothing more to do.
yeah. Just accept the moment as it is.
Yes.
And isn't that
And
uncomfortable
then
as
you're teaching them by setting that boundary of being silent, you're giving them their responsibility of being with their emotion. And then
yeah,
and then maybe the coming back to them is just loving them that they had to go through that experience.
yeah,
Oh, that feels so much nicer. That feels more aligned to me.
yeah, yeah. Giving people space, right? And then them discovering maybe there is a consequence that comes up maybe later
Yes.
on when they're home and they realize something within themselves, right?
Yeah, because we take people's lessons away from them a lot.
Yes, by stepping into their lane and punishing them, right?
Yeah.
But who are we to dictate what a valid or natural consequence should be?
Yeah. Because you just said it at the beginning of this, like, we know that we created this situation for us. Well,
Yes.
so did our children. Our children are creating things for themselves,
Mhm.
their soul,
Even if they're not aware of it,
yes,
right?
unconsciously, but it's between them and their soul and their higher self, right? Like, and
Yeah.
so, they're creating situations too that are going to help them in the future.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's why we have these conversations, guys, because do you see how confusing it gets?
Yeah. And when you're really awake, when you're aware, when you're diving into all this work with Angie and I, it can get really, and it's okay that it's confusing. It's okay
Yes.
that you're not clear all the time because you are changing so rapidly. We are changing the vibration of this planet so rapidly, guys, that it's okay if you're like,
What the fuck?
yeah. Yeah.
What the fuck am I doing? I don't even know what I'm
Yeah.
doing as a parent. I
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah.
I'm doing the
And I
best I
mean,
can.
yeah. And that if there is a consequence that is required from that, whatever the situation is, wouldn't it be best be found while you're present?
Yeah.
Because that's something that's been popping up for me a lot lately. Um, is I can be in the exact same situation and be very verbal and upset about it, or I can be very, very present with it and still and go within. And then that outcome is going to be a heck of a lot. Maybe the outcome is uncomfortable either way, but it's going to be a lot smoother
Yeah.
if I'm present with it because I'm just adding more presence into like the presence bank. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because the more present you are, the more present
The
you will be.
easier it is.
Because right now is a combination, because we're all energy, right? And right now, this moment is a combination of your past frequency and your current frequency. So
Yes.
if you're the more and more present you get, the more times you choose, I'm not going to react. I'm just going to sit and maybe I don't know the answer. And that's okay. You don't need to know the answer as long as you're
Just gonna
aware
be
that you don't
present.
know the answer. But the more and more you do this, well, the more and more you're going to be present because the more present moments you're living in, right? Is that a
Yeah.
sentence?
I understand. I followed it. Maybe it wasn't, but I followed it.
Yeah. Yeah. But I find that's like the big kind of revelation
Mm.
is whatever's going on, are you aware of it? Are you aware of yourself in that situation?
Yeah, and are you aware of what you're feeling in that situation?
Mm,
And you don't even have to be aware of what you're feeling specifically, but be aware of whether you like the feeling or not.
mm,
That's it.
mm.
For me, I use the Tonglen practice. That's why I would talk about that because when it doesn't feel good, whether I have a name for what I'm feeling or not, it doesn't matter. It doesn't feel good. I breathe it in. Like that's what Tonglen is. You breathe in the pain and you breathe out what you want to feel instead. And so even if I can't name what feels bad, I know that I don't like it. It's unwanted. And so when something's unwanted, it creates more suffering if you suppress it. And so
Yeah.
if you want less suffering, breathe it in. Breathe it in and know that in this exact moment, there are other people feeling this exact thing too. And I'm breathing it in for all of us. And then I'm going to breathe out peace and calm. I always breathe out peace and ease when I don't know what I want to feel. I know it's always going to be peace and it's always
Yeah.
going to be peace.
Yeah.
Like. So it's a really powerful practice to just know how you and I mean I'll probably talk about that more in the next episode, but so I don't know. I don't know if we came to any kind of
Conclusion.
conclusion about clear,
Clear conclusion.
consistent
Yeah. I don't know.
I
But
actually
it's
feel
brought up
like
some important questions,
yeah,
though.
yeah,
Some important, like introspective questions, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
And if you are a person like me who has struggled, like Natalie who says, has struggled with meeting this expectation of giving clear, consistent, consequences. I really wish Julie was on this conversation. I can't wait to hear her input because she's very much about clear, consistent consequences, right? And this is
Mhm.
something I really struggle with. And so and now I'm questioning whether it's necessary in a way.
Right.
I don't
Because
I
there's
don't
this
know.
expectation of, and I think it's also because there's an well, there's also I guess a knowing of, again, we're physical creatures. There are going to be physical
Yes.
consequences. I mean, if you're running full force and you run into the wall, well, you're probably going to have a headache, right, or a
Yeah.
bruised toe or something. But it's like the forced consequence of, I don't like how you behave, or I don't like that you're not cleaning up the mess, so I will punish you for that. That's where I get a lot of internal
I
resistance,
do.
because I'm like, or I could just get super present, scrub it out, stay in my own lane, and I know it'll all work out. And maybe that person, maybe will choose to live, oh, thank you. Maybe that person will choose to, not pick up after themselves for maybe months or years, but then something along their journey. Maybe that's their journey. Who am I to judge, right?
Yes, that's what I
Yeah.
mean. It might be their journey. And we
Yeah.
steal lessons from people all the time. And how do I
Yeah.
know, like, to me, like, like, yeah, for me in this conversation, how do I know I'm not stealing their lesson by trying to,
Yeah.
and I'm shaming myself at the same time. And we know this is how the programming works. And so I'm
Yeah.
questioning it. I am questioning it. That's what my takeaway in this is for myself is I'm questioning the necessity of it. I love how you spoke about, and you've talked about this before, physical consequence. Like that's physical makes sense to me. You don't put your hand on the thing, you will burn your hand and it'll hurt.
Yeah. Yeah.
But spiritually, emotionally, who am I to tell you?
Yeah. Especially when it comes to like habits and stuff, because I'm like, that's really an internal journey for that person to
It
explore, because
is.
I've done that internal exploration of, why do I always do this? Something as simple as like, why do I
Yes.
grab the second coffee mug from the left, right?
Right.
But but why, right? And like, yeah, you don't want to steal that experience from someone, and maybe they're 5 years old and they won't have that experience for another 20 years.
Yeah.
But what's it to you?
Yeah.
Right? Wouldn't it serve that person better if you are just present with them?
Yeah. And you allow them to go through what needs to be gone through.
Yeah. And maybe your lesson in this lifetime needs to be, stay in your own freaking lane, and just, if you feel like tidying up a room, tidy it up, but don't bitch at people who leave their cereal bowls out on the floor. I don't know, right? Like,
Yeah. This is such a, oh
this
man,
is not very clear.
we definitely didn't clear anything up. So if you were
No.
expecting
But maybe we
clarity,
didn't need to, right? Maybe we needed to like
maybe this is the
shake the jug
clarity.
a little bit,
Yeah.
right?
Maybe this is the clarity that somebody needed.
Yeah.
I needed it. I needed it. And it
Yeah.
helps us, another point I want to bring up about just having conscious conversation like this is it helps us own what we think. Like at the end of this conversation, I am like, I don't even think I care about clear, consistent consequence. And I'm okay with saying that now. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh,
Where
yeah.
when
It
we
brings forth
started, I
a
was
new
talking
level
about,
of honesty within
yes,
ourselves.
because when we
Oh,
started,
damn.
I was like, I can't be clear and consistent with my consequences. What's wrong with me? I don't feel that way anymore.
Well, there you go.
That's
Perhaps that was the
interesting.
purpose of this conversation.
Maybe that was it. Well, I would love to hear what people have to say about this.
Yes.
Really love Julie. I really want to know what your input is because I know there's so much value in your input here. And oh, and everybody, like what is it that you feel like around, after having this conversation, after hearing us kind of go in a different direction, I think. What does that bring up for you? You know, what how does it feel to try and give consequences? What attachments do you have to the word consequences?
Yeah.
Is it serving? That's the ultimate question that we want to ask ourselves. Is it serving?
Mhm.
And if
Mm.
not, put an intention out there. How can I serve here? Yeah. Anyway, I love you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you, Natalie, for having this conversation and for
Oh,
just
you're
always
welcome.
being such a great, I don't know, sounding board, a great like person to be able to come into these honest conversations.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank
I
you,
just love it.
Angie. I love having these conversations with everyone. And let us know, guys, those of you watching, like, what do you think about this episode, right? Because we kind of went off to the side, and sometimes that's what happens, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, let me know. I'd really love to know what you guys think about clear, consistent consequences in this awakening journey we're all on.
Yeah. Yeah. And what are your curiosities too? Maybe you have your own curiosities, or maybe you have a different perspective on this. Please share. All right. I love you guys. Until next episode. Uh yeah, just keep being you. Keep being gentle with yourself too.